Staff Sergeant Kate Ghost Morrison had spent her career learning to control her breathing, but right now she wanted nothing more than to scream. The Zarkak's military commander, Supreme Commander Valfax, according to his ornate insignia, held her prized M24 sniper rifle like it was a child's toy, his iridescent scales rippling with barely contained amusement. "Fascinating," he drawled, his translator adding a mechanical tinge to his condescension. "Your species still relies on controlled explosions to propel tiny pieces of metal." He turned the rifle over, his four-fingered hand carelessly dragging across the custom stock she'd spent months perfecting. "And you actually aim these, manually?" The United Nations Security Council chamber, normally a bastion of diplomatic tension, had transformed into something worse. A show-and-tell session where Earth's military capabilities were being systematically ridiculed. Representatives from 30 nations shifted uncomfortably in their seats as the alien delegation exchanged knowing looks. "Sir," Kate managed through clenched teeth, "that rifle has confirmed kills at what? A mere 3 of your kilometers." Valfax interrupted, his secondary eyes blinking in sequence, apparently their species equivalent of an eye roll. "Our civilian personal defense shields can detect and deflect objects moving at 10 times the velocity your weapon achieves. Even our younglings would consider this quaint." To demonstrate his point, he activated his personal shield. A subtle shimmer enveloped his tall, lean frame like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. "Observe," he said, and deliberately dropped the rifle. Kate lunged forward instinctively, but stopped as the weapon froze mid-fall, caught by the shield's field. The assembled aliens chittered, their version of laughter, as Valfax let the rifle hover for a moment before releasing it to clatter onto the conference table. That's when she saw it. Just for a fraction of a second, as the rifle made contact with the table's surface, there was a delay. The shield flickered, adjusted, and then stabilized, but not before the wooden stock had made physical contact. It was tiny, probably imperceptible to anyone who hadn't spent thousands of hours studying minute details through a scope. But Kate saw it. Their shields weren't perfect. They were predictive. "We appreciate Earth's enthusiasm in sharing its military capabilities," Valfax continued, addressing the broader assembly. "But perhaps we should move on to discussing more relevant matters, like your species' integration into the Galactic Defense Protocol." His secondary eyes fixed on Kate. "After all, we wouldn't want Earth's warriors engaging in combat with such primitive tools. For their own safety, of course." The chamber erupted in diplomatic murmurs as Kate retrieved her rifle, checking it for damage. Her fingers traced the fresh scratch on the stock, while her mind raced through the implications of what she'd seen. The alien shields were calculating trajectories, predicting impact points, and generating counterforces. But what happened when something moved too slowly to register as a threat? "Staff Sergeant Morrison," General Hayes whispered as she returned to her seat, "maintain your composure." "That's an order." Kate nodded, but her mind was already somewhere else, specifically in her grandfather's garage, where a dusty reloading press sat next to boxes of hand-loaded ammunition. Rounds he carefully crafted to move just fast enough to stay accurate, but slow enough to maintain optimal energy transfer for hunting. As the Zarkak's delegation continued their presentation, showing holographic displays of their energy weapons and faster-than-light drives, Kate pulled out her phone under the table. Her brother answered on the second ring. "Hey sis, you're supposed to be in that big alien meeting." "Tommy," she interrupted quietly, "is Dad's reloading equipment still in the garage?" "Yeah, why?" She watched Valfax's shield shimmer as he gestured dramatically, remembering that fraction of a second delay. "Because I think I just found a way to wipe those smug grins off our new alien friends' faces." Kate's apartment looked like a conspiracy theorist's den. Every wall was covered with printouts of video stills showing Zarkak's shield interactions, while her laptop played footage on endless loops. Empty energy drink cans formed a miniature cityscape on her coffee table, and 3 different tablets displayed ballistics calculations that would make most physics professors sweat. "This is definitely against protocol," Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez said, dropping another classified hard drive onto Kate's desk. As Kate's former spotter and current military intelligence officer, she was risking her career smuggling out these demonstration videos. "Tell me again why we're analyzing their shield reactions to random debris instead of actual weapons fire." Kate pointed to a frozen frame showing the Zarkak soldier walking through a sandstorm during their Mars base establishment. "Look at the shield response time." Now, she switched to footage of the same shield, deflecting a 50 calories round. "Compare it to this." Sarah leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "The shield lights up before the bullet even hits." "Exactly." Kate pulled up her ballistic software. "Their shields are predictive, constantly scanning for incoming threats, but they define threats based on velocity and mass calculations. It's like a computer spam filter. It has to decide what to block and what to let through." She grabbed one of her custom-loaded rounds from the table. The bullet was heavier than standard, the powder load carefully reduced. 3 tours in MARSOC taught me something. Sometimes the best way through a defense isn't to hit it harder, it's to slip through the gaps. Her phone buzzed. Tommy had sent photos of their grandfather's reloading recipes, yellowed pages covered in meticulous handwriting. "Got Dad's old loading data," his text read. He was obsessed with subsonic rounds for night hunting. "Less noise, better energy transfer. That what you're looking for?" Kate's fingers flew over her keyboard, inputting the load data. The simulation results made her smile for the first time in days. "Sarah, look at this. A round moving just above subsonic speed, but with enough mass to maintain stability. The shields might not even recognize it as ammunition." "That's great in theory," Sarah said, "but we need proof. And I don't think the Zarkaks are going to volunteer for target practice with your experimental rounds." Kate's reply was interrupted by breaking news on her muted TV. The headline made both women freeze. "Zarkak's military demonstration. Aliens to showcase shield technology at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Tomorrow at 900, Sarah read aloud. "They're inviting military observers to test their shields against any conventional weapons." She turned to Kate. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Kate was already pulling on her jacket. "I need to see my brother about some reloading equipment." The next 6 hours in Tommy's garage were a blur of precise measurements and careful adjustments. Kate's hands moved with practiced efficiency, weighing powder charges to the 10th of a grain. Her grandfather's ancient reloading press creaked with each pull of the lever, turning raw components into precisely crafted ammunition. "You know," Tommy said, watching her work, "Grandpa always said there was art in loading your own rounds. Said factory ammo was for people who didn't understand their weapons." He picked up one of the finished cartridges, holding it up to the light. "Never thought his loading recipes would be used against aliens." Kate loaded the last round into a magazine, her movements deliberate. "They think we're primitive because we still use projectile weapons, but they forgot something crucial. We've had centuries to perfect this art. Every margin of error, every ballistic variable, every environmental factor has been studied and accounted for by generations of shooters." She slid the magazine into her rifle case alongside 5 others, each loaded with slightly different powder charges. "Tomorrow, we'll see if being primitive has its advantages." Sarah texted coordinates for the demonstration as Kate packed her gear. The message ended with "brass balls," showing up to a tech demo with a bolt action. "You sure about this?" Kate smiled, running her fingers over the worn stock of her M24. "They want to prove their shields are impenetrable." She snapped the rifle case shut. "Let's see how they handle a ghost." Aberdeen Proving Ground buzzed with an energy that made Kate's combat instincts tingle. Military officials from 24 nations milled around the observation area, their attention fixed on the Zarkak's warriors standing proudly in the testing zone. The alien scales gleamed under the morning sun, their shields creating subtle distortions in the air around them. Quite the audience, Sarah whispered, helping Kate set up her spotting equipment. General Hayes is here, along with half the Joint Chiefs. And is that? Yes, that's the Secretary of Defense trying to look inconspicuous in the back. Kate said nothing, focusing on her preparations. She'd positioned herself at the end of the firing line, away from the cluster of modern weapon systems being readied. Her wooden shooting mat and worn M24 drew curious glances and barely concealed smirks from both human and alien observers. The demonstration began with a bang. Literally. A new M1A2 Abrams tank fired its main gun, a depleted uranium round screaming toward the Zarkak's test subject. The alien didn't flinch. His shield flared brilliant blue, and the round disintegrated harmlessly, 2 feet from impact. You see, Valfax's voice boomed over the speakers. Your most powerful kinetic weapons are simply too predictable. Our shields calculate trajectory and velocity, generating a perfect counterforce before impact. More weapons followed. The latest Barrett, 50 calories, rail guns, even experimental coil weapons, all stopped cold by the seemingly impenetrable shields. Each failure was met with polite applause from the alien delegation and growing unease from Earth's military leaders. Staff Sergeant Morrison, Valfax called out, his secondary eyes fixed on her position. Perhaps you'd like to try your traditional weapon. For thoroughness, of course. Kate felt every eye turned toward her. She'd been counting on this, on their arrogance making them eager to humiliate Earth's primitive weapons again. She nodded to Sarah, who began calling out environmental data. Wind, 3/4 value, pushing left to right. Temperature 68 Fahrenheit. Humidity 62%. Barometric pressure 30.12 inches and stable. Kate loaded her first custom round. The bullet was heavier than standard. The powder charge carefully calculated. Not too slow. It needed to maintain accuracy. Not too fast. It had to slip under the shield's threat detection threshold. Send it when ready, Sarah murmured. Kate took a breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The report was different, quieter, almost subsonic. The Zarkak's warrior didn't even activate his personal shield, clearly expecting another futile demonstration. The bullet flew true, but struck the dirt 2 feet to the left of the target. Chittering laughter erupted from the alien delegation. Perhaps, Valfax called out, you should have your weapon's accuracy checked. Kate was already chambering her second round. This one had a slightly different powder charge, adjusted for the observed impact. She'd learned long ago that the first shot was always a ranging shot, gathering data for the kill shot to follow. Send it, Sarah whispered. The second shot cracked out. This time, the bullet clipped the warrior's shield emitter on his belt. There was no brilliant flash, no energy dispersion. The shield simply failed to register the threat. The alien staggered, more surprised than hurt, staring at his damaged equipment in disbelief. The laughter stopped. Impossible, Valfax sputtered. Our shields are calibrated for high-velocity threats, Kate finished, standing up. You've spent centuries perfecting defenses against energy weapons and hypervelocity rounds. But when was the last time you had to stop a simple piece of lead moving just faster than the speed of sound? The silence that followed was deafening. General Hayes was the first to move, walking briskly to Kate's position. Staff Sergeant, I believe we need to have a conversation about scaling up your ammunition modifications. Immediately. As military leaders swarmed her position, Kate caught Valfax's eye. The alien commander was staring at her with all 4 eyes. His scales shifted to a deep blue that she hadn't seen before. Was it respect? Fear? Perhaps both. Sarah nudged her. Think they still find us primitive? Kate saved her rifle, a slight smile playing at her lips. Primitive isn't always a disadvantage. Sometimes, being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. The Pentagon's classified briefing room hadn't seen this much activity since the Zarkaks first appeared in Earth's orbit. Kate stood before a wall of screens, each displaying different angles of her demonstration shot, while generals and defense officials leaned forward in their seats like eager students. "The key isn't force, it's finesse," she explained, pointing to a slow-motion replay. "Their shields are looking for threats above certain velocity thresholds. By manipulating our powder charges and bullet weights, we can deliver lethal force while flying under their radar, so to speak." Admiral Chen raised his hand. "And you can replicate these results?" Before Kate could answer, the room's emergency lights flashed red. The Secretary of Defense burst through the door, his face ashen. "They're making their move." Zarkak ships just appeared over every major military installation worldwide. Screens switched to live feeds. Massive alien vessels hovered over bases from Fort Bragg to Ramstein, their hulls shimming with the same shield technology that had seemed impenetrable just days ago. Kate's throat tightened as she recognized the distinctive silhouette above Aberdeen, Valthax's command ship. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies," a communications officer announced. Valthax's hologram materialized in the center of the room. His scales had shifted to a deep crimson, a color they'd never seen before. "Humans," his voice carried none of its previous condescension, only cold determination. "Your recent demonstration has forced us to accelerate our timeline. We cannot risk allowing your species to develop countermeasures to our defensive systems." "This is an act of war," the Secretary of Defense began, but Valthax cut him off. "This is an act of preservation. Your civilization will be placed under protective custody until we can properly integrate you into the galactic community. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. You have 1 hour to surrender your military commands." The hologram vanished, leaving the room in stunned silence. "Options," General Hayes barked. "Conventional forces are useless against their shields," someone said. "Air Force reports energy weapons might work, but we're years away from deployment." Kate cleared her throat. "Sir, I can have 300 modified rounds ready in 2 hours. If I can train a team of snipers." 2 hours is 1 hour too late, Staff Sergeant," Hayes interrupted, but his eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Unless, how many rounds do you have right now?" Kate patted her rifle case. 48, sir. All tested and verified at yesterday's load session." The general stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need the room." Staff Sergeant Morrison. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, stay." As others filed out, Hayes activated a secure terminal. "I'm looking at the structural plans for the new Zarkak's embassy in D.C. They're using it as their ground command center." He turned to Kate. "Their commanders will be gathering there to oversee the occupation. All of them, in one place, protected by shields they believe are impenetrable." Sarah pulled up satellite imagery on her tablet. "Sir, there's a half-constructed office building across the street. Perfect firing position. But what?" Kate asked. "But if we miss, if this doesn't work, we'll have revealed our only advantage, and Earth will have fired the first shot." Hayes studied both women for a long moment. "Staff Sergeant, what are your thoughts?" Kate ran her fingers along her rifle case, feeling the worn edges that had accompanied her through 3 tours. "Sir, they're expecting us to either surrender or launch an overwhelming assault. They've planned for both scenarios." She looked up, meeting the general's gaze. "But they're not expecting one shooter, with technology they consider obsolete, to change the course of a war." Hayes nodded slowly. "A ghost in their perfect machine." He turned to the secure terminal. "I'll need presidential authorization for this. If you pull this off, Morrison, you'll either be court-martialed or given the Medal of Honor." "With respect, sir," Kate checked her watch. "We've got 53 minutes to save the world." "The medals can wait." Washington, D.C. had never looked more alien. Zarkak's ships cast strange shadows over the National Mall, their shield harmonics creating aurora-like patterns in the evening sky. Kate moved through the empty streets like a ghost, her well-worn ghillie suit blending with the urban shadows. The weight of her rifle case felt heavier than usual, perhaps because the fate of humanity now rested within it. Echo actual, in position. Sarah's voice whispered through her earpiece. Her spotter had set up in a different building, using multiple angles to minimize detection. You've got a congressional security detail approaching your 6, about 30 seconds out. Kate pressed herself into a doorway, controlling her breathing as the guards passed. Their flashlight beams swept the street, but none thought to look for someone wearing yesterday's urban camo pattern. The Zarkax had changed Earth's security protocols, but they hadn't changed human nature. Guards still followed predictable patterns. Clear, Sarah confirmed. 30 meters to entry point. Thermal shows 2 human guards inside the lobby, both focused on external threats. Third floor access point remains unmonitored. Kate moved like flowing water between shadows, her boots silent on the concrete. The half-constructed office building loomed ahead, 48 stories of bare girders and partially finished floors. Perfect high positions on at least 6 levels, but she'd chosen the 39th, high enough to have command of the embassy's main conference room, low enough to avoid rooftop security suites. Time check, General Hayes's voice crackled through command frequency. 28 minutes to deadline. Sarah responded. Target building is gaining activity. Thermal showing multiple Zarkax signatures gathering on the 15th floor. Kate reached the service elevator shaft, her fingers finding the maintenance ladder in darkness. Going dark for climb, she whispered, switching off her radio. The next 20 minutes would be pure endurance, climbing 39 floors with full gear, in complete silence. Her world narrowed to the rhythm of movement. Hand over hand, foot over foot, each motion carefully controlled to prevent metal from touching metal. The ladder was her entire universe, the burning in her muscles ignored through years of training. This was why she ran those endless stairs in full kit, why she spent hours in the gym when others called it overkill. Floor markers gleamed dimly in her night vision. 15, 24, 33. She reached her floor with 8 minutes to spare, muscles trembling but mind crystal clear. The partially finished office space offered multiple firing positions. She chose the second best one. Never pick the obvious spot. Her sniper instructor had drilled into them. The perfect position is the first place they'll check when the shot goes out. Echo actual, back on comms, she whispered, unfolding her shooting mat. Beginning setup. Sarah's response was all business. Wind is variable, 2 to 5 knots, shifting between northwest and north-northwest. Temperature dropping, now 62 Fahrenheit. Humidity at 71%. Range to target, 428 meters. Glass analysis shows standard commercial thermal barrier, minimal deflection expected. Kate assembled her rifle with practiced precision, each movement automatic after thousands of repetitions. The custom-loaded magazines were arranged in precise order, each minutely different in powder charge for varying shield configurations. Multiple high-value targets confirmed. Sarah updated. Thermal shows. Yes, Valthax himself just entered the conference room. Center position, as expected. Arrogant bastard still thinks he's untouchable. All stations, update, Hayes commanded. Overwatch ready. Sarah's voice was steady. QRF on standby. The extraction team, waiting in the shadows. Medical standing by. For after, if there was an after. Ghost in position, Kate reported, her scope settling on the embassy's windows, ready to reverse first contact. The scope's crosshairs settled on the exact spot where Valthax would stand to announce Earth's surrender. Through the thermal overlay, she could see him preening, adjusting his ceremonial armor. His shield shimmed proudly, programmed to stop any high-velocity threat. But Kate wasn't planning on a high-velocity shot. 5 minutes to deadline, Hayes announced. Ghost. The president says give them hell. Kate's finger curled around the trigger. With pleasure, sir, with pleasure. Valthax stood exactly where Kate expected, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the conference room's lights. Through her scope, she could see his secondary eyes scanning the assembled human delegates with barely concealed disdain. The chamber's windows offered a perfect view of the White House, a calculated insult, positioning Earth's surrender within sight of its power center. 2 minutes, Sarah whispered through comms. Confirming wind correction. Half-minute left hold. Target shield configuration appears standard. Kate made microscopic adjustments to her scope, feeling each click with practiced precision. The first round in her magazine was loaded to exact specifications, 168-grain Sierra Matchking bullet, carefully reduced powder charge, primer seated to precise depth. In her mind, she ran through her grandfather's mantra: speed isn't power, precision is power. Multiple shields activating, Sarah reported. They're expecting a last-minute assault. Thermal shows. Wait, getting strange readings from their emitters. The shields are pulling more power than usual. They're strengthening them, Kate realized. Expecting heavy weapons. A smile touched her lips. They're making our job easier. More power means higher velocity thresholds. Valfax raised his hands for silence. His translator crackled to life, broadcasting on all frequencies. People of Earth, the time has come to. Kate exhaled half a breath and squeezed the trigger. The modified round left her barrel at just under the speed of sound. Through her scope, she watched its trajectory with almost surreal clarity. No sonic crack, no supersonic shockwave, just the quiet whisper of a bullet moving too slowly to trigger alien defensive systems. Valfax never even activated his personal shield. The round struck him center mass, precisely between his primary and secondary hearts. His scales shifted from commanding crimson to shocked white as he stumbled backward, fluorescent blood staining his ceremonial armor. For 3 heartbeats, nothing moved. Then chaos erupted. Confirm hit, Kate reported calmly, already cycling her bolt. Target down. Switching to secondary. The Zarkak security chief was screaming orders, his shield flaring brilliant blue as he activated every defense system they had. But he was looking for threats in the wrong velocity range, expecting human weapons to behave like human weapons. Kate's second shot took him in the throat. Ghost, multiple hostiles moving to defensive positions, Sarah called out. They're scanning for energy signatures, high-velocity projectiles. They still don't understand what's hitting them. The third shot dropped their technology minister. The fourth eliminated their ground force commander. Each round slipped through their defenses like they didn't exist, turning their most advanced protection into expensive light shows. New contact. Sarah's voice carried genuine alarm. Hostile on your floor, moving fast. They've triangulated your position. Kate remained focused on her scope. Distance to contact. 60 meters in closing. Ghost, you need to move. Not yet. Kate chambered her 5th round. Still have priority targets. The Zarkak's war strategist died trying to activate their ship's weapon systems. The fleet commander fell reaching for his emergency beacon. Each shot was methodical, precise, exploiting the one weakness their advanced civilization had never considered: the deadly efficiency of primitive weapons. Contact, 30 meters. Sarah was nearly shouting. Multiple hostiles, moving in formation. Kate took her last shot, eliminating the Zarkak's communications director. Then, with practiced efficiency, she broke down her rifle and slipped it into its case. The sound of alien boots on concrete echoed through the empty floor. Ghost, status. Hayes demanded. Kate secured her gear and moved to her pre-planned exit route, a maintenance shaft leading to the building's lower levels. 7 targets eliminated. Mission accomplished. She paused at the shaft entrance. Remind me, sir, what's the record for most alien leaders eliminated in under 2 minutes? A chuckle crossed the command frequency. Pretty sure you just said it, Staff Sergeant. As she disappeared into the darkness, the sounds of confused alien searchers echoing above, Kate allowed herself a small smile. Primitive weapons, my ass. Behind her, through the embassy windows, she could see the Zarkak ships starting to rise, their formations broken, their command structure shattered by a weapon they had dismissed as obsolete. Sometimes, the old ways were the best ways. The next 48 hours transformed Earth's military doctrine. Kate found herself in a secured bunker beneath the Pentagon, surrounded by weapons developers from every major military power. Her grandfather's reloading manual, now scanned and projected onto massive screens, had become the most studied document in modern warfare. The Chinese have already modified their QBU-88 sniper platforms, Sarah reported, sliding a tablet across the table. Russians are adapting their entire Dragunov line. Even the French are reopening mothballed ammunition plants. Kate studied the reports while loading another test round. The bunker's walls were lined with captured Zarkax shield emitters, each waiting to be tested against new ammunition variants. Any word from orbit? Chaos, General Hayes answered, entering the room. The Zarkax fleet is in disarray, losing their entire command structure in under 2 minutes. He shook his head. They never planned for this contingency. Their whole military doctrine was built around overwhelming technological superiority. A weapons engineer from BAE Systems raised his hand. Staff Sergeant, we've analyzed your loads. The principles are sound, but mass production will be challenging. The tolerances are incredibly tight. They have to be, Kate replied, seeding a primer with practiced precision. Too fast, shields activate. Too slow, the round tumbles. We're threading a needle that their technology doesn't know exists. The bunker's alert system pulsed. Sarah checked her tablet and whistled. Multiple Zarkax ships breaking orbit. Looks like they're running. Not running, Hayes corrected. Regrouping. They'll be back with modified shields, trying to close this vulnerability. He turned to Kate. How long until we can arm every sniper team on Earth with your rounds? Kate held up her latest creation, studying it in the fluorescent light. Hand-loading. 2 weeks to train teams, maybe a month for full deployment. But mass production. She gestured to the engineers. That's their department. We don't have weeks, a new voice announced. The Secretary of Defense strode in, his tie loosened and eyes heavy from lack of sleep. Intel suggests they're gathering a massive fleet. Every ship they can spare, pulled from across 3 sectors. They'll return with overwhelming force. The room fell silent. Even with modified ammunition, Earth couldn't face thousands of ships. They needed something more. Kate rolled the round between her fingers, feeling its weight. An idea formed, dangerous, possibly insane, but wasn't that humanity's specialty? Sir, she said slowly, their ships used the same shield technology as their personal armor, just scaled up correct. The secretary nodded. According to our analysis, yes. Why? Then they'll have the same weakness. It's not about the size of the round. It's about the velocity relative to the shield's detection threshold. She turned to the engineers. How fast can you scale up a subsonic projectile? Understanding dawned on the BAE engineer's face. You want to build ship killer rounds using the same principle. That's brilliant. Railroad guns, modified naval artillery. He was already running calculations on his laptop. We could have prototypes in days. And they won't see it coming, Sarah added. They'll be expecting us to develop energy weapons to try matching their technology. Nobody would expect us to weaponize their blind spot on this scale. Hayes leaned forward. Can we mass produce enough ammunition before they return? We don't need to, Kate replied. Every military power on Earth already has artillery pieces, naval guns, and heavy weapons platforms. We just need to modify their ammunition. Let them bring their fleet. We'll show them why humanity never abandoned projectile weapons. The Secretary of Defense studied the captured shield emitters, then looked back at Kate. The Joint Chiefs are implementing a new military doctrine, focusing on what they're calling low-velocity warfare. We need someone to head the training program. Kate chambered her test round with a satisfying click. With respect, sir, I'm not done hunting yet. But I know a few hundred snipers who'd love to teach the galaxy why you should never mock Earth's primitive weapons. The alert system pulsed again. Somewhere above, humanity was preparing for the biggest fight of its existence. But for the first time since the Zarkax arrived, they weren't preparing to match alien technology. They were preparing to render it obsolete. 3 weeks later, Kate stood on the deck of the U.S. Missouri, watching crews load modified 16-inch shells into the reinstated battleship's main guns. The obsolete vessel had been pulled from retirement, its massive guns perfect for delivering the newly developed ship-killer rounds. Similar scenes played out across Earth's oceans as mothballed naval artillery found new purpose. Fleets picking up movement, Sarah announced, studying tactical displays. Massive hyperspace signatures approaching. Initial count suggests over 3,000 vessels. Kate adjusted her scope, now mounted on a custom anti-material rifle designed specifically for modified ammunition. Around her, hundreds of snipers from dozens of nations stood ready, their weapons loaded with rounds that defied alien technology through sheer simplicity. "They're emerging," Hayes's voice crackled through the command net. Battle stations. The sky lit up as the Zarkax fleet arrived, their ships blocking out the sun. Leading them was a vessel twice the size of the others, its hull bristling with weapon emplacements. New shield emitters covered every surface. They'd clearly learned from their last encounter. "Attention, primitive species," a new voice boomed across all frequencies. "High Admiral Zexthor, Valthax's replacement. Your previous victory was impressive, but we have adapted. Surrender now, or..." "All batteries, fire," Hayes ordered quietly. The Missouri's main guns roared, joined by naval artillery worldwide. The massive shells moved far slower than typical rounds, barely supersonic. The Zarkax didn't even raise their shields, their sensors dismissing the projectiles as debris. Until they struck. 8 capital ships disappeared in synchronized explosions. The modified shells had torn through their hulls like they didn't exist, detonating deep within vital systems. Confusion rippled through the alien fleet as more ships fell, their mighty shields useless against weapons they considered extinct. "They're powering up shields," Sarah called out. "Maximum strength. And they're still not stopping our rounds. They literally can't lower the threshold enough without leaving themselves vulnerable to their own weapons." The High Admiral's voice returned, panic evident even through the translator. "Impossible. You're using projectile weapons. Primitive kinetic ammunition. Our shields are impressive," Kate replied on all frequencies, sighting in on the command ship's bridge. "But you forgot something crucial about humanity. We never stopped improving our primitive weapons. We never abandoned what worked. And most importantly," her finger tightened on the trigger, "we never forgot how to fight without relying on shields." The shot was perfect. Her round passed through the command ship's armored viewport like it was paper, finding the High Admiral with surgical precision. As he fell, the alien fleet's coordination crumbled. What followed wasn't really a battle. It was a revolution in warfare. Earth's obsolete weapons turned the sky into a killing field. Modified artillery shells reduced capital ships to debris. Sniper teams eliminated bridge crews through supposedly impenetrable shields. Humanity's primitive weapons, perfected over centuries, rendered the galaxy's most advanced defensive technology meaningless. The Zarkax fleet retreated in chaos, leaving behind hundreds of destroyed ships and a completely rewritten understanding of warfare. As the last vessels disappeared into hyperspace, cheers erupted across Earth's military channels. 1 month later, Kate stood before the United Nations, her dress uniform adorned with medals no one had ever earned before. Behind her, representatives from over 50 nations signed the Low-Velocity Warfare Accord, establishing Earth's new position in galactic politics. "The Zarkax made a crucial mistake," she testified. "They assumed that newer meant better, that progress only moved in one direction. They forgot that sometimes the old ways persist because they work, because they're reliable, because they've been refined by generations of experience." She held up one of her custom rounds. "This isn't just ammunition. It's humanity's legacy. We took what worked and made it better, Step by step, generation after generation, we never abandoned our foundations in pursuit of the next big thing. The Zarkak's ambassador, newly appointed and considerably more humble than his predecessors, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. So let this be a lesson to the galaxy, Kate concluded. Earth's weapons may seem primitive, but like humanity itself, they've survived because they work. And we've had a very, very long time to perfect them. As she left the podium, her grandfather's old reloading manual secure in her pocket, Kate smiled. Sometimes, the best way to advance wasn't to abandon the past. It was to build on it. After all, some things become classics for a reason.